I used to believe that loving your child unconditionally would eventually teach them gratitude. I never imagined that the very son I raised with my own hands would secretly take out a $750,000 life insurance policy on me, then plan to make my death look like an unfortunate accident during a so-called family hiking trip. But what Trent didn't know was that I had been setting my own plan in motion long before he ever thought of killing me. And by the time I was done with him and his scheming wife, Crystal, they'd learn exactly why you should never underestimate a 68-year-old grandmother who's had enough. Before we begin, let me know in the comments what city you're watching from, and don't forget to rate this story from 0 to 10 at the end. Trust me, you're going to want to stick around for this one, because what I did to them, well, let's just say karma has nothing on a grandmother with time, money, and a very detailed plan. My name is Vivian Montgomery, and at 68 years old, I thought I had seen every kind of betrayal life could serve up. Boy, was I wrong. I raised my son Trent as a single mother after his worthless father abandoned us when Trent was barely 3 years old. That man walked out the door one Tuesday morning claiming he was going to buy cigarettes, and the only thing he ever sent back was divorce papers 6 months later. Good riddance, honestly, but it meant I was on my own with a toddler and a mortgage. For the next 30 years, I worked my fingers to the bone as a registered nurse, pulling double shifts at Mercy General Hospital. While other women my age were going to book clubs and taking weekend trips, I was bandaging wounds, comforting families, and earning every penny I could to give Trent the life I never had growing up. I sacrificed everything for that boy. Vacations? Never took one. New clothes? Only when my old ones literally fell apart. Dating? Please, I didn't have time for romance when I was working 60-hour weeks to pay for Trent's private school, his college tuition, his car insurance, and later, much later, his seemingly endless series of emergencies. And there were so many emergencies. In college, it was gambling debts that somehow always totaled exactly the amount I had in my savings account. After college, it was failed business ventures, a food truck that got repossessed, a cryptocurrency investment that vanished overnight, a consulting business that never had a single client. Each time, Trent would call me crying, begging, swearing this was the last time he'd ever need help. Like an idiot, I believed him. Every single time. When he turned 35 and announced he was marrying Crystal, I actually felt relieved. Finally, I thought someone else could take care of Trent's problems. Maybe Crystal would be the stabilizing force he needed. Maybe she'd help him grow up and become the responsible man I'd tried so hard to raise. The wedding alone cost me $85,000 for one day because Crystal had dreamed of a fairy tale wedding since she was a little girl. The venue, the flowers, the dress, the photographer, the band, the open bar for 200 guests. I paid for every last detail because Trent looked at me with those puppy dog eyes and said, "Mom, I just want Crystal to be happy. Isn't that what you want too?" Of course I wanted his happiness. That's all I'd ever wanted. I lived alone in my beautiful 4-bedroom colonial in Willowbrook Heights, a house I bought 25 years ago when property values were reasonable and I could still qualify for a decent mortgage on a nurse's salary. Now the same house was worth $1.8 million, and it was my pride and joy. Every room held memories of raising Trent, from the kitchen where I'd made him breakfast every morning before school, to the den where I'd helped him with homework every night. But the real love of my life, if I'm being honest, was my 13-year-old golden retriever, Rusty. That dog had been with me through everything. Late-night study sessions when Trent was in high school, the scary mammogram results that turned out to be benign, the lonely holidays when Trent was too busy to visit. Rusty never asked for anything except love, food, and his twice-daily walks around the neighborhood. Some nights, when the house felt too quiet and I was wondering what I had to show for 45 years of sacrifices, Rusty would pad over to my chair and rest his gray muzzle on my lap. In those moments, I felt less alone in the world. That was my life at 68. A beautiful house, a loyal dog, and a son who only called when he needed money. I should have known it was about to get much, much worse. It was a Thursday morning in April when my whole world shifted on its axis. I was in my garden, the same garden where I'd taught Trent to plant tomatoes when he was 7, where I'd built him a tire swing that he used exactly 3 times before losing interest, deadheading my prize-winning roses when my phone rang. The caller ID said Trent, and my heart did that little flutter it always did when my son called. Maybe today would be different. Maybe today he'd call just to chat, just to tell me about his life, just to say he loved me without asking for anything in return. "Mom!" His voice practically vibrated with excitement through the phone. "I have the most incredible news. Crystal's pregnant! We're having a baby! I swear I nearly fainted right there in my rose garden. My gardening shears slipped from my hands and clattered onto the stone path as tears of pure joy streamed down my face. After 33 years of being Trent's only family, after decades of watching my friends become grandmothers when I wondered if I'd ever get that blessing, it was finally happening. I was going to be a grandmother. Oh my God, Trent! I sobbed into the phone, not caring that I was ugly crying in my backyard. Oh, sweetheart, this is the most wonderful news. How far along is Crystal? When is the baby due? Have you had the first ultrasound yet? The questions tumbled out of me in a rush of excitement and love. I was already mentally redecorating the guest room as a nursery, already imagining Christmas mornings with a grandchild, already planning the college fund I'd start the very next day. We just found out yesterday, Trent said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. Crystal's about 6 weeks along. The baby should be here around Christmas. Can you believe it? A Christmas baby. A Christmas baby. I sat down hard on my garden bench, overwhelmed by the magnitude of this gift. Not only was I going to be a grandmother, but I'd have a Christmas grandchild. It felt like every sacrifice I'd ever made, every lonely night, every missed opportunity had led to this perfect moment. That's when I decided they had messed with the wrong grandmother.
Trent, I said, my voice thick with emotion, I want you to know that I'm going to be the best grandmother that baby could ever have. Whatever you need, prenatal care, baby furniture, a bigger place to live, Grandma Vivian has got you covered. I meant every word. In that moment, sitting in my garden with tears of happiness on my cheeks, I would have given them everything I owned if it meant ensuring that baby had the best possible start in life. Actually, Mom, Trent's voice got a little quieter, we were hoping you'd say that. Crystal's been really stressed about money, and stress isn't good for the baby. The doctor said she needs to take it easy, maybe even quit her job at the salon. And prenatal vitamins are expensive, and we want to make sure she gets the best of everything. Say no more, I interrupted, already reaching for my purse to find my phone so I could access my banking app. How much do you need, sweetheart? Well, if you could spare maybe $75,000, just to cover everything for the next few months while Crystal adjusts to the pregnancy. $75,000. It was a significant chunk of my retirement savings, but this was my grandchild we were talking about, my legacy, the future of our family. Of course, I said without hesitation. I'm transferring it right now. Make sure Crystal gets the best prenatal vitamins, and don't you dare let her stress about money. This baby is going to be so loved and so well cared for. I pulled out my phone with shaking fingers, shaking from excitement, not fear, and initiated the wire transfer. $75,000 sent with more joy than I'd felt in years. Mom, you're incredible, Trent said, his voice warm with what I thought was gratitude. I'm going to be a dad now. You better believe I'll take good care of Crystal and our little bundle of joy. I was about to tell him how proud I was of him, how excited I was to help with the baby, how I'd been dreaming of this moment for years, when his tone changed abruptly. All right, Mom, gotta run. Crystal's got a doctor's appointment and I need to drive her. Talk soon. The line went quiet, but not completely dead. And that's when I heard the words that would haunt me for the rest of my life. Finally, came Crystal's voice, clear as day through the phone. The old bitch sent the money. My heart stopped, actually stopped beating for what felt like an eternity. I held my breath, clutching the phone so tightly my knuckles went white, desperately hoping I'd misheard, desperately praying that my son would defend me, would tell his wife not to talk about his mother that way, would show even an ounce of the respect I'd earned through 33 years of unconditional love. But what happened next destroyed me completely. Trent laughed, actually laughed, a cold, cruel sound that I'd never heard from him before. She's always been too careful with her money. We had to fake a pregnancy just to get her to open the floodgates. Did you see how fast she transferred it? Pathetic. The phone slipped from my numb fingers and hit the garden path with a crack. I stared down at it, watching the screen spiderweb across Trent's contact photo, a picture I'd taken of him at his wedding where he looked so happy, so full of promise, so much like the little boy I'd raised with such hope and love. Fake pregnancy. The words echoed in my mind like a death sentence. There was no baby. There had never been a baby. There would never be a grandchild for me to spoil and love and teach about life. It was all a lie, carefully constructed to separate me from my money. I sat in my garden, the garden where I taught my son to appreciate beauty, to nurture growing things, to understand that love and care could make something flourish, and felt something die inside my chest. Through the cracked phone screen, I could still hear them talking. Crystal's voice, bright and cheerful now, discussing vacation destinations. Trent's voice, planning how they'd spend my money on themselves. They talked about my $75,000 like it was monopoly money, like it had cost me nothing, like I was some endless ATM instead of a human being who'd worked her entire life for financial security. When the line finally went dead, I sat there for what felt like hours. Rusty found me eventually, nudging my hand with his wet nose and whimpering softly like he could sense my heartbreak. I buried my face in his golden fur and cried until I had no tears left. That night, I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying that phone call, hearing Crystal's casual cruelty and Trent's heartless laughter. Every memory I had of raising him felt tainted now. Had he always seen me this way? Had every hug, every I love you, every proud moment been fake? But somewhere around 3 a.m., as I lay staring at the ceiling of the house I'd worked my entire life to pay for, something shifted inside me. The grief was still there. It would probably always be there, but it was being slowly replaced by something else. Something cold and calculating and utterly focused. If Trent and Crystal wanted to play games with my money and my emotions, then they were about to learn that I'd been playing the game of life a lot longer than they had, and I was much, much better at it. What I didn't expect was that just 2 days later, they would have the audacity to show up at my doorstep. I was in the kitchen, making myself a cup of tea and trying to process the magnitude of their betrayal, when the doorbell rang. Rusty barked once, his polite someone's here bark, not his danger bark, and padded to the front door with his tail wagging. I looked through the peephole and nearly dropped my teacup. Trent and Crystal stood on my front porch, both of them wearing bright smiles and looking for all the world like the loving son and pregnant daughter-in-law they were pretending to be. Crystal even had her hand resting on her flat stomach in that protective gesture I'd seen real expectant mothers make. For just a moment, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe I'd misheard the phone call. Maybe there really was a baby and I'd jumped to the wrong conclusion. Maybe my son hadn't really called me pathetic and laughed about manipulating me. But then I saw Crystal's eyes through the glass and I knew. They were calculating eyes, predatory eyes, the eyes of someone who saw me as nothing more than a mark to be conned. I took a deep breath, straightened my shoulders, and opened the door with what I hoped looked like a surprised but delighted smile. But what happened next would make them realize their biggest mistake wasn't just stealing my money, it was underestimating exactly who they were trying to steal from.
Trent, Crystal, what a wonderful surprise, I exclaimed, stepping aside to let them in. I wasn't expecting you. Trent immediately wrapped me in a hug that felt just as warm and genuine as it always had. For a moment, I almost convinced myself that I'd imagined everything. This was my son, the boy I'd raised, the man I'd loved unconditionally for 33 years. Surely there was some misunderstanding. We were in the neighborhood, Trent said, pulling back to look at me with those eyes that had melted my heart from the moment he was born. Figured we should check on you, make sure you're taking care of yourself. Crystal stepped forward with a perfectly practiced, concerned expression. Vivian, you look a little pale. Are you feeling all right? I worry about you being all alone in this big house. The performance was flawless. If I didn't know better, I would have been touched by their concern. I'm fine, I assured them, leading them into the living room. Just tired. You know how it is at my age. The words tasted like ash in my mouth, but I needed to see how far they'd take this charade. Trent handed me a small bag from the drugstore. Brought you some multivitamins, he said, with that boyish grin that used to make me forgive him anything. Figured you could use a little boost to maintain good health. I looked at the generic vitamins, the cheapest ones you could buy, probably cost them all $5, and felt that cold rage building in my chest again. $5 vitamins after I'd just given them $75,000. But I smiled sweetly and thanked him like he'd brought me diamonds. How thoughtful of you, I said, setting the bag on my coffee table. Can I get you something to drink? Some coffee, water. Water would be great, Crystal said, settling onto my couch like she owned it. The baby makes me so thirsty all the time. The baby that didn't exist. I excused myself to the kitchen, taking a moment to grip the edge of the counter and breathe deeply. When I returned with their drinks, they were whispering to each other with their heads close together. They broke apart when I entered, both flashing me those fake smiles again. So, Trent said, accepting his water with a casual nod, We've been talking, and we have something we want to discuss with you." Here it comes, I thought, the real reason for their visit. "Of course," I said, settling into my favorite armchair, the one where I read Trent bedtime stories, where I helped him with homework, where I comforted him through his first heartbreak. "What's on your minds?" Trent scratched his head in that deliberately casual way he'd perfected over the years, the gesture he always made when he was about to ask for something big. "Well, you know Crystal's pregnant now," he began, glancing at his wife, "and our apartment is really cramped. It's not healthy for Crystal or the baby to be living in such a small space." Crystal jumped in right on cue, placing both hands on her stomach and sighing dramatically. "It's just so stressful, Vivian. The walls feel like they're closing in on me, and the neighbors are so loud. It's not a good environment for raising a child." They rehearsed this. I could tell by the way they tag-teamed the conversation, each one picking up where the other left off. "We were thinking," Trent continued, "maybe we could move in with you for a while, just until after the baby is born and we can find a bigger place. This house is so big, and you're here all alone." "It would be perfect," Crystal exclaimed, her eyes lighting up with manufactured enthusiasm. "We could help you with the housework, the cooking, the yard work, and once the baby comes, you'd get to see your grandchild every single day." My non-existent grandchild, the carrot they were dangling to manipulate my emotions. I felt Rusty's warm weight against my legs and reached down to pet him, using the moment to compose myself. These people, and I was beginning to think of them as people rather than family, were asking to move into my home under completely false pretenses. They were planning to turn my sanctuary into their free hotel while they spent my money and laughed at my gullibility. "That sounds wonderful," I said softly, and watched their faces light up with triumph. "Of course you can move in. Family should stick together, especially with a baby on the way." Trent practically glowed with victory, but I could see he wasn't quite satisfied yet. He was testing the waters, seeing how much more he could extract from his pathetic, lonely old mother. "Actually, Mom," he said, leaning forward with that earnest expression I'd fallen for so many times before, "Crystal and I were thinking it might make sense to put the house in my name." My blood pressure spiked, but I kept my expression neutral. "You know, for tax purposes and estate planning. Eventually this house would come to me anyway, right? This way you wouldn't have to worry about property taxes or maintenance or any of that headache stuff. I could handle all of it." Crystal nodded eagerly, her voice dripping with fake concern. "Exactly, Vivian. At your age, you shouldn't have to stress about these things. You've done so much for us, for Trent his whole life, and now for me and the baby. It's time someone took care of you for a change." The lies rolled off her tongue so easily I almost admired the skill. Almost. They stayed for another hour, painting pictures of the happy family life we'd all have together once they moved in. Crystal talked about morning sickness and cravings, and how excited she was to have a mother figure to guide her through pregnancy. Trent reminisced about growing up in this house and how perfect it would be for his child to have the same experience. By the time they left, they were practically giddy with success. They thought they had me completely wrapped around their little fingers. What they didn't know was that I'd been taking mental notes the entire time, cataloging every lie, every manipulation, every calculated gesture, and I was already forming a plan. Little did they know, their perfect crime was about to become their perfect downfall.
That night, after they'd gone back to their cramped apartment to spend my money on God knows what, I sat in my study with a legal pad and started writing. Not just planning, documenting. Every conversation, every lie, every dollar they'd taken from me. If Trent and Crystal wanted to play games with a 68-year-old grandmother, they were welcome to try, but they were about to learn that some grandmothers bite back. The next few days passed in a strange haze of normalcy on the surface and cold calculation underneath. I went about my regular routine, morning coffee with Rusty, tending my garden, grocery shopping at the market where I'd been going for 20 years, but my mind was working constantly, turning over the details of what Trent and Crystal had done to me. On Saturday morning, while I was watering my prize roses, Mrs. Patterson from next door called over the fence. "Vivian, I haven't seen Trent in ages. How's that boy doing?" Mrs. Patterson had lived next door for 15 years. She'd watched Trent grow from a teenager into a man, and she always asked about him with genuine warmth. "Oh, he's wonderful," I called back, forcing brightness into my voice. "He and Crystal are expecting a baby." "How exciting!" Mrs. Patterson clapped her hands together. "You must be over the moon about becoming a grandmother." "I am," I lied smoothly. "They're actually going to move in with me soon to help me around the house and save money for the baby." It was important to establish the narrative early. If people expected to see Trent and Crystal living in my house, there would be fewer questions later about why they were here and what they were doing. That afternoon, I did something I hadn't done in years. I called my lawyer.
James Morrison had been handling my legal affairs since I bought the house 25 years ago. He'd helped me with my will, my power of attorney documents, and various other matters over the years. He was about my age, recently retired from his big firm, but he still took on select clients as a favor. "Vivian," his voice was warm when he answered. "What a pleasant surprise. How have you been?" "I'm well, James. I hope I'm not bothering you, but I have some questions about estate planning and property transfers." "Never a bother. What's on your mind?" I chose my words carefully. Trent is married now and starting a family. He's been asking about putting my house in his name for tax purposes. I wanted to understand the implications. It wasn't exactly true, but I needed information without revealing too much about my situation. James said, and I could hear papers rustling. "There are definitely tax benefits to certain types of transfers, but there are also significant risks. If you transfer the property entirely, you lose all control over it. The new owner could sell it, mortgage it, or even evict you without cause." "Even if it's my son?" James paused. "Vivian, I've been practicing law for 40 years, and I've seen families destroy each other over money and property. Blood relationships don't provide legal protection. If you're considering this, I'd strongly recommend keeping some control, maybe a life estate arrangement or a trust structure." "What would you advise?" "Before anything else, I'd want to know why the rush. Estate planning should be done carefully, with full consideration of all possibilities. Can you come in next week? We should discuss this properly." I made an appointment for the following Tuesday, but even as I hung up, I knew I wouldn't be giving Trent my house. Not now, not ever. What I was planning was something else entirely. That evening, I did something else I hadn't done in years. I researched my son's life online. I'd always respected Trent's privacy, never snooping through his social media or trying to keep tabs on his activities. But now I needed to know exactly who I was dealing with. What I found made my blood run cold. Trent's Facebook page was full of photos from expensive restaurants, luxury vacations, and shopping sprees, all funded, I realize now, by the emergency money I'd been sending him over the years. There were pictures of him and Crystal at a 5-star resort in the Bahamas just 3 months ago, around the same time he'd called me crying about needing $15,000 to avoid eviction. Crystal's Instagram was even worse. Designer handbags, jewelry, spa days, and workout sessions with a personal trainer. Her bio listed her as an entrepreneur and lifestyle influencer, but from what I could see, her only business was spending other people's money. But the worst discovery came when I dug deeper into Crystal's background. A quick Google search of her name brought up some interesting results, including a news article from 2 years ago about a woman named Crystal Morrison who'd been arrested for check fraud. Same photo, same person. My son had married a criminal, and neither of them had bothered to tell me. I sat back in my desk chair staring at the computer screen and felt the last vestiges of motherly love and loyalty drain away. This wasn't just about the fake pregnancy or the money. Trent had brought a con artist into our family, and together they were systematically robbing me blind. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They assumed that a 68-year-old nurse who'd spent her life caring for other people would be too naive, too trusting, and too desperate for family connection to fight back. They were about to learn that just how wrong they were. On Tuesday morning, I kept my appointment with James Morrison, but not for the reasons I originally intended. "Vivian," he said, rising from behind his desk to greet me with a warm handshake, "you look troubled. Are you all right?" "I need to ask you something confidentially," I said, settling into the leather chair across from his desk. "If someone took out a life insurance policy on me without my knowledge, how would I find out about it?" James's eyebrows shot up. "That would be insurance fraud, Vivian. You can't insure someone's life without their signature and consent. What makes you think someone might have done this?" I told him about Trent and Crystal's behavior, their sudden interest in moving in with me, their request to transfer the house. I didn't mention the fake pregnancy. That was too humiliating to share, even with someone I trusted. "I just have a feeling. Call it intuition, but something doesn't feel right." James was quiet for a long moment, studying my face. Finally, he leaned forward and pulled out a legal pad. He tells me, "There are ways to check. The Medical Information Bureau maintains a database of life insurance applications. If someone has applied for coverage on you, there would be a record. I can help you request a disclosure." "How long would that take?" "A few weeks for the official report, but..." He paused, seeming to wrestle with something. "I have a friend who works in insurance fraud investigation. If you're really concerned about criminal activity, he might be able to expedite things unofficially." I didn't hesitate. "Please, I need to know." They didn't know what was coming for them. James made a phone call while I waited, speaking in low tones to someone named Detective Rodriguez. After a few minutes, he hung up and looked at me seriously. "He can run a preliminary check this afternoon. Can you meet him at 3 p.m.? And Vivian,
If your instincts are right about this, you may be in more danger than you realize. At exactly 3 p.m., I sat in Detective Rodriguez's small office in downtown Phoenix, watching him type on his computer with increasing intensity. "Mrs. Montgomery," he said finally, turning his screen toward me, "your instincts were correct. There's a $750,000 whole life policy on you, taken out 6 weeks ago by your son, Trent Montgomery, and his wife, Crystal Morrison." My hands went numb. $750,000. That's what my life was worth to them. "The application shows your signature," Detective Rodriguez continued, "but I'd bet money it's forged. The address listed for you is their apartment, not your house. And look at this." He pointed to a section of the application. "They listed you as having multiple serious health conditions, diabetes, heart disease, high blood pressure. Do you have any of those conditions?" "None," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "They also listed Crystal as your primary caregiver and Trent as having financial power of attorney over your affairs. None of that is true either, I assume." I shook my head, feeling sick. Detective Rodriguez leaned back in his chair and studied me carefully. "Mrs. Montgomery, in my experience, when someone takes out a large life insurance policy on an elderly family member using false information, they're usually planning to collect on it sooner rather than later. Have they suggested any activities that might put you in danger? Trips, medical procedures, anything that could be made to look like an accident?" "The hiking trip." I suddenly remembered Trent mentioning a family hiking trip to celebrate the baby during one of our recent phone calls. At the time, I had thought it was sweet that he wanted to spend time with me in nature. Now I realized it was probably their plan for making my death look accidental. "Yes," I said, and told him about the hiking suggestion. Detective Rodriguez's expression grew grim. "Mrs. Montgomery, I need to ask you directly. Do you feel safe in your home right now?" I thought about it, honestly. As long as they think their plan is working, yes. They need me alive until they can get me to sign over the house and arrange their accident. "This is enough evidence to arrest them both," he said, reaching for his phone. "Insurance fraud, elder abuse, conspiracy to commit murder. We can put them away for decades." "No." The word came out stronger than I'd intended. "Not yet." Detective Rodriguez stared at me. "Mrs. Montgomery, these people are planning to kill you. And they're going to fail," I said calmly, "because I know what they're planning, and they have no idea that I know. That gives me the advantage." "Ma'am, with respect, this isn't a game. These are dangerous criminals." I looked at this man who was probably 20 years younger than me, who thought he needed to protect me from my own son and daughter-in-law, and I felt a cold smile cross my face. "Detective Rodriguez," I said quietly, "I spent 30 years working in emergency medicine. I've seen every kind of human evil you can imagine. I've held dying children while their parents screamed. I've fought to save the lives of drunk drivers who killed innocent families. I've worked through natural disasters, gang shootings, and domestic violence cases that would give you nightmares." I leaned forward, holding his gaze. "I'm not some helpless old lady who needs rescuing. I'm a woman who survived everything life could throw at her, and now I'm facing the two people who think they can murder me for money. They've made the biggest mistake of their lives." Detective Rodriguez was quiet for a long moment. Finally, he nodded slowly. "What do you need from me?" "Evidence, documentation, and when the time comes, I want you to be ready to arrest them with charges that will stick." He handed me his business card. "My cell phone number is on the back. If you feel unsafe for even 1 second, you call me immediately. And Mrs. Montgomery, whatever you're planning, be careful. These people have already shown they're willing to kill." I tucked his card into my purse and stood up. "Detective, they're not willing to kill. They're planning to kill. There's a difference." "What difference?" I paused at his office door and looked back at him. "People who are willing to kill think about the consequences. People who are planning to kill think they've already won." That evening, I sat in my study with all the evidence spread out before me like pieces of a puzzle. The insurance policy, Crystal's criminal background, Trent's social media posts showing their lavish lifestyle funded by my money, bank records showing every emergency loan I'd given him over the years. And slowly, carefully, I began to plan their destruction. The beauty of my situation was that Trent and Crystal had no idea I knew what they were planning. As far as they were concerned, I was still the naive, loving mother who'd do anything for her son and the grandchild she thought was coming. That gave me the ultimate weapon, their own arrogance. Over the next week, I played my part perfectly. When Trent called to check on me, I gushed about how excited I was to be a grandmother. When Crystal texted about her morning sickness, I sent care packages with ginger tea and saltine crackers. When they mentioned looking for a bigger apartment for after the baby, I casually suggested they could save money by moving in with me. "Are you sure, Mom?" Trent asked during our Friday evening call. "We don't want to impose." "Impose?" I laughed, injecting just the right note of lonely old lady desperation into my voice. "Sweetheart, this house is too big for just me and Rusty. It would be wonderful to have family here, especially with the baby coming." I could practically hear him grinning through the phone. "That's really generous, Mom. Crystal's going to be so relieved. She's been so stressed about finding a place we can afford." "Stressed about finding a place they can afford with my money, more likely." "And when would you like to move in?" I asked. "How about next weekend? That would give us time to pack up the apartment." "Perfect! I'll start getting the guest room ready for you and Crystal, and I'll begin converting the den into a nursery." "You don't have to do that yet, Mom. The baby's not due for months." "Oh, but I want to. I'm so excited to be a grandmother, I can't help myself." After we hung up, I sat in my kitchen and allowed myself one moment of genuine grief for the relationship I'd thought I had with my son. Then I got back to work. Because while Trent and Crystal thought they were moving in with a gullible victim, they were actually walking into a carefully prepared trap. The first phase of my plan was simple: make them comfortable, let them think their scheme was working perfectly, give them enough rope to hang themselves with. The second phase was more complex. I needed to document everything, every lie they told, every manipulation they attempted, and every piece of evidence that would prove their criminal intent. And the third phase, well, that was where things would get interesting. I spent Saturday shopping for surveillance equipment, not the obvious kind that they might notice, but small, discreet cameras that I could hide around the house. I also bought a voice-activated recorder that I could carry in my pocket to capture our conversations. Sunday, I rearranged the house to accommodate my new tenants. I moved my most valuable possessions, jewelry, important documents, family photos, to a safe deposit box at the bank. I also made copies of everything related to my finances and stored them with James Morrison. If Trent and Crystal were planning to steal my house and my life, they'd find that both were much more complicated to take than they had imagined. Monday morning, I did something I'd never done before. I hired a private investigator. Marcus Webb was recommended by Detective Rodriguez as someone who specialized in domestic fraud cases. He was a former police detective who'd started his own agency after retirement, and he had the kind of no-nonsense demeanor that inspired confidence. "Mrs. Montgomery," he said, settling into the chair across from my kitchen table, "Detective Rodriguez filled me in on the basics. Tell me what you need." "I need to know everything about Crystal Morrison's background, her methods, her other victims, and I need to know if Trent has been involved in any of her previous schemes." Marcus nodded, making notes on his tablet. "Anything else?" "I need surveillance of their current activities, where they go, who they meet with, what they're planning, and I need it all documented in a way that will hold up in court." "That's going to be expensive." I thought about the $75,000 they'd already stolen from me, the house they were planning to take, the life insurance money they intended to collect after my death. "Money is no object," I said. "I want to destroy them completely." Marcus looked at me with new respect. "Most people in your situation want justice. You want revenge." "I want both," I corrected. "Justice is what they'll get from the legal system. Revenge is what—"
The following Saturday, Trent and Crystal arrived at my house with a U-Haul truck and more belongings than I had expected from people who claimed to be financially struggling. Designer furniture, expensive electronics, and enough clothes to stock a small boutique. I greeted them at the door with freshly baked chocolate chip cookies and a smile that I hoped looked genuinely welcoming. "Welcome home," I said, hugging them both. Crystal's hug felt like embracing a snake, but I maintained my performance. "Mom, you didn't have to bake," Trent said, but he immediately grabbed 3 cookies and bit into one. Some things never changed. He still had the sweet tooth I'd indulged throughout his childhood. "Of course I did. This is a celebration. My son and daughter-in-law are moving home, and I'm going to be a grandmother. It's the happiest day I've had in years." Crystal smiled that perfect practice smile and rubbed her flat stomach. We're so grateful, Vivian. This is going to be so much better for the baby. The baby that didn't exist, but I just beamed at her and nodded enthusiastically. I helped them move their things into the guest room, chattering excitedly about all the family activities we could do together. I showed Crystal the room I was converting into a nursery, complete with paint samples and furniture catalogs I'd strategically left around. "Oh my God, Vivian," she said, her eyes wide with what looked like genuine emotion. This is more than I ever dreamed of for my baby." For a moment, I almost felt bad about what I was planning to do to her. Then I remembered that she was a career criminal who specialized in destroying elderly people's lives, and the feeling passed. By evening, they were settled in, and we sat down to the first family dinner I had cooked in years. I had made all of Trent's childhood favorites: pot roast, mashed potatoes, green beans, and apple pie for dessert. "This is incredible, Mom," Trent said around a mouthful of pot roast. "I'd forgotten how good your cooking is." "Well, you'll be eating a lot more of it now," I said warmly. "I love having people to cook for again." Crystal was picking at her food, probably worried about maintaining her figure, but she made all the right noises about how delicious everything was and how lucky the baby was to have a grandmother who cooked so well. After dinner, while we were cleaning up, Trent casually brought up the subject I'd been expecting. "Mom, have you had a chance to think about what we discussed, about putting the house in my name?" I paused in the middle of loading the dishwasher as if I had forgotten about his request. "Oh, yes. Actually, I called my lawyer about it. He said we could take care of the paperwork any time." Trent's eyes lit up. "Really? That's great. When do you think we could do it?" "Well, he said it would be easier if we did it after the baby is born. Something about family estate planning being clearer once we know if it's a boy or a girl." I was making this up completely, but it sounded plausible. I could see disappointment flicker across both their faces, but Crystal recovered first. "That makes sense," she said smoothly. "We're not in any rush. The important thing is that we're all together now." "Exactly," I agreed. "Family is what matters most." Later that evening, after they'd gone to bed, I sat in my study reviewing the surveillance footage from the hidden cameras I had installed. The audio was crystal clear, and I had already captured several incriminating conversations between them. In one, Crystal complained about my pathetic neediness and joked about how easy I was to manipulate. In another, Trent speculated about how much money they could get for the house once I was out of the picture. But the most damning footage came from their bedroom, where they thought they had complete privacy. "How long do we have to keep this up?" Crystal asked while unpacking her clothes. "Just until we can get her to sign the house over," Trent replied. "Once that's done, we can arrange the accident and collect the insurance money." "What if she gets suspicious?" Trent laughed, that same cold laugh I'd heard on the phone. "Are you kidding? She's so desperate to be a grandmother, she'd believe anything. Did you see how excited she got about the nursery?" "She's actually kind of pathetic," Crystal had said. "I almost feel bad about what we're going to do to her." "Don't," Trent replied firmly. "She's had a good life. 68 years is enough for anyone. And it's not like she has anyone else who cares about her." Sitting in my study, watching my son and his criminal wife plan my murder with the casual indifference of people discussing the weather, I felt something shift inside my chest. The last trace of maternal love I'd felt for Trent died in that moment. He wasn't my son anymore. He was just another criminal who'd made the mistake of targeting the wrong victim. By Thursday of the second week, Marcus Webb had delivered his full report on Crystal Morrison, and it was even more damning than I had hoped. She wasn't just a small-time con artist. She was part of an organized network that specifically targeted wealthy elderly people across multiple states. "She's got at least 12 victims we can prove," Marcus said, sitting across from me in a coffee shop downtown while Trent and Crystal thought I was grocery shopping. "And Mrs. Montgomery, in 3 of those cases, the victims died under suspicious circumstances before they could testify against her." My blood ran cold. "She's killed before?" "We can't prove it legally. All 3 deaths were ruled accidental or natural causes, but an 84-year-old man who supposedly fell down his stairs just days before he was scheduled to give a deposition, a 79-year-old woman who had a sudden heart attack while hiking alone with Crystal, and a 91-year-old man who accidentally overdosed on his medication right after changing his will." I felt sick. And the police didn't see the pattern? Different states, different jurisdictions. Until now, no one connected Crystal to all 3 cases. But with your evidence and testimony, we can finally build a case that will put her away for life. "What about Trent?" His expression grew grim. "Based on the surveillance footage you've provided, he's not just an unwitting accomplice, he's an active participant. The insurance fraud alone is a felony. But conspiracy to commit murder? That's life in prison territory. I stared down at my coffee cup, watching the steam rise. My son, the boy I had raised, the man I'd loved unconditionally for 33 years, was planning to kill me for money. Not just steal from me, not just abandon me, but actually end my life. Marcus, I said quietly, 3 elderly people are dead because Crystal Morrison manipulated them and no one stopped her. If I just have them arrested now, she might plea bargain again. She might get out in a few years and find new victims. And Trent? I was quiet for a long moment, remembering the little boy who used to curl up in my lap while I read him bedtime stories. Then I remembered his cold laughter he talked about my death, his casual dismissal of my life as worthless. Trent made his choice. Now he gets to live with the consequences. Little did they know, I was about to spring a trap that would destroy them both.
That evening, I set the final phase of my plan in motion. "Trent, Crystal," I said over dinner, "I've been thinking about what you said about the hiking trip to celebrate the baby. I'd love to do that this weekend." Both of them looked up sharply from their plates. I could see the quick glance they exchanged. Surprise, excitement, calculation. "Really?" Crystal said, placing a protective hand over her flat stomach. "Are you sure you're up for it, Vivian? Some of those trails can be pretty challenging." "Oh, I think I can handle more than you might expect," I said with a smile. "I've been hiking these mountains for 20 years. I probably know them better than most people half my age." This was true. One thing I'd never told Trent about my life after he'd moved out was that I joined a hiking group for seniors. We went out every weekend, and I'd become quite accomplished at navigating difficult terrain. I was probably in better physical shape than either of my would-be murderers. "That sounds great, Mom," Trent said, trying to sound casual. "Which trail were you thinking?" "Eagle's Peak," I said, naming one of the most remote and treacherous trails in the area. The views are spectacular, but not many people go there because it's so isolated. Perfect for an accident, in other words. Crystal's eyes lit up. "That sounds perfect. When should we go?" "Saturday morning. We could make a whole day of it. Pack a picnic, enjoy the outdoors together, just family time." After dinner, I excused myself to make some phone calls while they whispered excitedly in the living room about their perfect opportunity to finally get rid of me. Little did they know, I was making very different preparations for our hiking trip. The first call was to Detective Rodriguez. "It's happening Saturday. Eagle's Peak Trail. I need you and your team in position by dawn." "Mrs. Montgomery, are you absolutely sure about this? Once we start, there's no going back." "I'm sure. Just make sure you get everything on record. I want their confessions, their actions, everything." The second call was to Marcus Webb. "I need you to monitor the surveillance feed from the house remotely on Saturday. The moment we leave, I want you to execute Phase 2. "Understood. Are you sure you want to go through with this part? It seems extreme. "Marcus, they've been spending my money on luxury vacations while planning to kill me. Extreme is exactly what they deserve." The third call was to James Morrison. "James, I need you to execute the documents we prepared. All of them. As soon as I give you the signal on Saturday." "Vivian, I have to say again, what you're planning is legal, but it's going to destroy them financially." "Good," I said simply. "That's the point." The fourth and final call was to someone Trent and Crystal had never heard of, Dr. Patricia Hendricks, my physician for the past 15 years. "Pat, I need you to prepare the medical records we discussed, all of them, and I need them delivered to Detective Rodriguez first thing Saturday morning." "Are you sure about this, Vivian? Once this information is public, it's going to change everything." "Everything has already changed, Pat. Now I'm just making sure the truth comes out." Friday night, I barely slept. Not from fear. I felt strangely calm about facing down my would-be murderers, but from anticipation. After weeks of playing the victim, after 33 years of being manipulated and used, I was finally going to show Trent and Crystal exactly who they were dealing with. Saturday morning dawned clear and cold, perfect hiking weather. I got up early and prepared our picnic. Sandwiches, fruit, water bottles, and a few special additions that would make the day very memorable.
Crystal came down to breakfast wearing designer hiking gear that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. She'd clearly spent some of my money preparing for this trip. "Morning, Vivian," she said brightly, rubbing her stomach. "The baby and I are so excited about our family hike." "Morning, sweetheart," I replied, handing her a travel mug of coffee. "I made your favorite, extra strong, with cream." What I didn't mention was that I'd also added something else to her coffee. Nothing dangerous, just a mild herbal supplement that would make her very sleepy in a few hours. I learned a lot about natural remedies during my nursing career. Trent appeared a few minutes later, also dressed in expensive hiking gear. "Beautiful morning for this, Mom. I can't wait to spend the day with my two favorite girls." His two favorite girls, the woman he was planning to murder and the woman who was helping him do it. The hypocrisy was breathtaking. "I'm excited too," I said warmly. "It's going to be a day none of us will ever forget." We loaded into Trent's USV, paid for with my money, of course, and headed toward Eagles Peak. During the 40-minute drive, Crystal kept up a steady stream of chatter about baby names and nursery decorations, while Trent played the role of the devoted, expectant father. I smiled and nodded and played along, all while reviewing my plan one final time. Everything had to go perfectly. The timing, the evidence, the confrontation, all of it had to be flawless. As we pulled into the remote hike trail parking area, I saw exactly what I'd expected to see. No other cars. We were completely alone, just as they had planned. But what Trent and Crystal didn't know was that we weren't as alone as we appeared to be. Hidden in the tree line, Detective Rodriguez and his team were already in position, equipped with long-range surveillance equipment and recording devices. Every word we spoke, every move we made, would be captured in high definition. Marcus Webb was monitoring the feeds from my house, ready to execute the second phase of my plan the moment we left. And James Morrison was standing by with legal documents that would change everything. And Dr. Hendricks had already delivered my medical records to the police, records that would add a final and devastating twist to the day's revelations. As I stepped out of the USV and breathed in the crisp mountain air, I felt a sense of calm determination wash over me. This was it, the moment when Trent and Crystal would finally face the consequences of their actions. They thought they were leading a lamb to slaughter. They had no idea they were walking into a trap that would destroy them both. But what happens next will make them realize their biggest mistake wasn't just planning to kill me, it was underestimating exactly who they were trying to kill.
Eagles Peak Trail started deceptively easy, but after 2 miles became steep and treacherous, with sheer drop-offs perfect for an accident. For the first hour, we hiked like a happy family. Crystal kept up her pregnancy performance while I maintained my role as the grateful grandmother. But as we climbed higher, I could see them getting impatient, waiting for the perfect spot to kill me. About halfway up, Crystal started showing effects of the herbal supplement I'd given her. Her steps became unsteady and she had to rest frequently. "Are you okay, honey?" Trent asked with fake concern. "Just tired," she mumbled. "Maybe we should head back." "Nonsense," I said cheerfully. "We're almost to Eagles Rock. The views are spectacular." By the time we reached Eagles Rock, a granite outcropping with a 200-foot drop, Crystal was barely standing. The supplement was designed to cause drowsiness, nothing permanent, but enough to make her useless for whatever they'd planned. "Wow," Trent said, looking around. "This really is remote. I bet if someone had an accident, it would be hours before anyone found them." The mask was slipping. His voice had taken on a cold, calculating tone. "It's beautiful, though," I said, pulling out my phone. "Let me get pictures of you two." What they didn't know was I was activating the voice recording app. "Actually, Mom, why don't you come over here?" Trent said, pointing to the cliff edge. "The view is incredible from this angle." I looked at where he was pointing, exactly where one push would send me tumbling to my death. "That does look like a great spot," I said, walking toward him. "But before I get too close to that edge, there's something I need to tell you both." I turned to face them, no longer hiding the cold fury I'd been carrying. I know about the insurance policy. The change in their expressions was immediate. Shock,
fear, then Trent's face hardening into pure malice. "What are you talking about?" he said, his voice flat and dangerous. "I know about the $750,000 life insurance policy you took out using forged documents. I know about Crystal's criminal background and her previous victims. And I know you didn't bring me up here for family bonding." Crystal tried to maintain the performance despite her drugged state. "Vivian, I don't know what you think you know, but I know there is no baby. I know you faked a pregnancy to manipulate me. I know you've been planning to murder me and make it look like an accident. And I know you both think I'm just a pathetic old woman too stupid to see what you're doing." The silence was deafening. Then Trent started laughing, that same cold, heartless laugh. "Well, I guess we don't have to pretend anymore, do we, Crystal?" Crystal tried to focus. "What do we do now?" "Now we stick to the original plan," Trent said, looking at me with eyes holding no trace of the son I'd raised. "Maybe Mom's not as stupid as we thought, but she's still just one old woman against two of us." He took a step toward me. That's when I smiled. "Actually, Trent, there are witnesses, quite a few of them. I pulled a GPS tracker from my pocket. I've been broadcasting our location and recording our conversation since we left the parking lot. Detective Rodriguez and his team have been following us all morning. They heard every word you just said." Trent's face went white. "You're bluffing." "Am I?" I held up my phone, showing the active recording. "Care to listen to yourself confessing to insurance fraud and attempted murder?" "Stop right there." The voice came from behind us. We turned to see Detective Rodriguez and two officers emerging from the tree line, weapons drawn. "Phoenix Police, nobody move!" Trent spun wildly, trapped between officers and the cliff. "This is just a misunderstanding. We're family." "Really? Because we've been listening through Mrs. Montgomery's wire, and it sounded like you were planning to push your mother off a cliff. Mrs. Montgomery, please step away from the suspects." I walked calmly past Trent and Crystal, who stared at me like they'd never seen me before. "You planned all of this," Trent whispered. "Yes, I did." "But you're supposed to love me no matter what." "And what? Let you kill me? Enable your criminal girlfriend?" Crystal was crying. "This isn't fair. We needed that money." "So did I said coldly. "I had plans to live." As they read them their rights, I had one more revelation. "Oh, Trent, you want to know the really funny part? It never would have worked anyway. I've been dying of pancreatic cancer for 6 months. The doctors give me maybe 3 more months to live." The shock on his face was worth it. "You were planning to kill someone who's already dying. When the insurance company investigates, they'll discover you took out a policy on someone with terminal illness without disclosure. That's fraud on a whole nother level." Crystal screamed. Trent stared at me, finally understanding what I'd done. "You destroyed us." "No," I said firmly. "You destroyed yourselves. I just made sure you faced the consequences." The complete destruction was swift. By the time I got home, Marcus had executed Phase 2 perfectly. Everything they owned was repossessed, purchased with my stolen money. Their apartment was cleaned out for non-payment. Their car was repoed for the fraudulent loan. Within hours, they had nothing. That evening, I called the media. By Monday, their mugshots were front-page news. I became a local celebrity, the grandmother who outsmarted her would-be killers. Crystal was sentenced to life without parole after authorities connected her to 5 elderly victims' deaths. Trent got 25 years for conspiracy to commit murder. 3 weeks later, I agreed to see him one final time. Sitting across from him in jail, separated by bulletproof glass, I looked at this hollow-eyed stranger who had once been my son. "Mom, I'm sorry," he sobbed. "I never meant for things to go this far." "Yes, you would have," I said calmly. "You absolutely would have pushed me off that cliff and celebrated collecting my insurance money." He cried about being confused, manipulated. "Trent, you made a choice to participate in planning to murder your own mother. You looked me in the eyes for weeks while planning to kill me. But I'm still your son." I stood to leave. "No, you stopped being my son the moment you decided I was worth more to you dead than alive." I walked out, leaving him behind forever. I'm writing this from my hospital room now. The cancer progressed faster than expected. Weeks, not months. But I'm not afraid. I've lived a full life and seen justice done. The civil settlements funded an elder abuse prevention program. I've traveled to Europe, reconnected with old friends, found real peace. Rusty is going to live with Mrs. Patterson. My house will become temporary housing for elder abuse victims. My remaining money funds legal aid for seniors. I won't leave anything to Trent. Not out of spite, but because some people can't be saved from themselves. My name is Vivian Montgomery. I was a nurse, a mother, and ultimately a woman who refused to go quietly. And that made all the difference. If you enjoyed this story, please like and subscribe for more tales of elderly wisdom triumphing over those who underestimate us. Rate this story 0 to 10 in the comments. And remember, respect your elders because we've had decades to perfect the art of not taking anyone's nonsense.